IAS Academy.
Hello all, welcome to IAS Academy and welcome back to the program Editorial Daily where we deal with editorial analysis which enriches your perspective and enhances your answer rating. So let's get started with our today's session. Yes, the first article for today is India's foreign policy must look seaward. So this article, while India is often speaks about this maritime security, when the India is talking about this maritime security through the initiatives like Sagar, that is the security and growth for all in the region, and the Indo-Pacific strategy, the article reminds us that the India's maritime policy should not only protect the ships and the sea routes, should not protect the ships and sea routes, but also it protects the Indian seafarers working across the world. So, the main basic core idea from this article, which we can take, is India's foreign policy should place the welfare and safety welfare and safety of Indian seafarers at the center of its maritime diplomacy. Okay, when we look into the background of this article and what is this context talking about in this article is India is one of the world's largest suppliers of the merchant navy personals. Okay, so, about around 3.2 lakh of Indian seafarers works on ships who are sailing under different foreign flags. Okay, so Indian seafarers often work for foreign companies and travel through the conflict-prone regions, such as when we see this West Asia, the Red Sea, the Gulf of Eden, and the Black Sea. These are the major conflict areas, but the seafarers work along this major conflict regions. So when geographical conflicts arises, the civilians becoming the unintended victims for this. Okay, now why is this issue important basically, and why upon this seafarers article is coming upon us? This article basically highlights that the several Indian seafarers have been killed. They have been killed during the West Asian conflicts which have been held, and also been stranded on the commercial ships, and also been detained for foreign authorities, and also faced abandonment by ship owners. So their families often do not know where they are, what are they doing, and which country is responsible for them, and who should rescue them if they are not back to home. So this creates a serious humanitarian concerns. Okay, this is what the article is basically talking about. Let us see this article in a complete different manner. Yes. Let us see. The topic is India's foreign policy must look seaward. The author of this article is Syed Akbaruddin, who is a former permanent representative of India to the United Nations, Dean Kautilya School of Public Policy, Hyderabad. And this is the source from the opinion page of the Hindu. Okay, now let us look into the context of the topic. Basically, the article talks about the Indian seafarers work in complex multi-jurisdictional environments, which is inadequate protection. Okay, so India must evolve its foreign policy and the diplomatic protocols beyond the land-based consular care to actively track, protect, and advocate for its vast maritime workforce across the global waters. Okay, now how can we link this article to our syllabuses? For GS paper 2, we can link this article to the India and its neighborhood, the relationships, that is the IR topic, and also the bilateral, regional, and global groupings and the arguments involving India, and also the international organizations and their mandates. And also for GS paper 3, also we can link this article to the Indian economy concept, and for basically in the transport, mainly shipping, and also in the infrastructure, ports and shippings, and the labor issues and human resource development. Okay, this is how we can link to our GS papers 2 and 3. Okay, now let us see the core concept of it. What is the core concept and the key arguments in this article which we can take up is, first is the ambiguity of jurisdictions at sea. The complex supply chains include a seafarer recruitment is in Mumbai, so they may work for a Singapore company or a Panama flagged ship which is carrying the Kuwait oil and faces the detention or attack in a fifth nation. Okay, so and coming to the accountability to the families, lack of accountability, the families often do not know which entity, like either which government or what is the ship owner or the insurer is responsible for a seafarer in a if seafarer is in a danger. This is what the family doesn't know anytime. Okay. Now, when we look into the impact of this geopolitical conflicts also, when the seafarers are working in the ships and traveling abroad, so of the 14 Indians were killed in the West Asian conflicts, which have been recently have done. So it has related the attacks since February 28th of this year, and at least 8 were seafarers on the commercial ships. Okay. Now, what is the India position in this global maritime workforce? If we see the workforce scale, if we consider, the Indian seafarer workforce stood at the approximately 3.2 lakhs as of June 2025 and nearly triple the size in 2014. Okay. When coming to the global ranking, if we see the 2026 seafarer workforce report, which has given, it ranks India second globally. Okay, over 12 percentage of the global supply is being done from India, which is trailing only the Philippines and slightly ahead of China. Okay, now coming to the systematic mismatch, if we see the seafarers mobility contracts sharply with the traditional consular systems that are strictly organized by the territorial judiciary. Okay, next coming to the abandonment metrics, the data from the International Transport Workers Federation, which shows the 1,125 Indian seafarers were abandoned in last 2020-2025. Okay, so more than from any other country, basically from India only, we have 1,125 seafarers who have been Indian seafarers who have been abducted. Okay, this is the report, which is a data which from the International Transport Workers Federation. Okay, yes. Coming to the government response and the maritime safety of it, coming to one of the government policy, if we see, the Indian government has announced its first seafarer first initiative, seafarers first initiative, which is the danger extends if the danger extends beyond the West Asia, like the Strait of Hormuz or to the Black Sea, the Red Sea, that is, or missiles or drones or mines, the Gulf of Aden, and the off West Asia, that is the piracy or the hostage taking. Okay, these are the high risk zones where the seafarers are working and crossing through. Coming to the operational directives of it, when this government has introduced the Seafarers First initiative on July 15th, the government has instructed the ship owners and the agencies to avoid deploying Indian seafarers through these Strait of Hormuz until further notice from the government is coming. Through the Strait of Hormuz, no Indian seafarer will be traveling. Has been given, this initiative has taken by the government of India and been told to the ship owners and the companies. Okay, this is what the government of India has taken. Next, coming to the institutional gaps and the need reforms, which we see, first it's the consular liaison protocols. What is this consular liaison protocol is, when Indian missions in major shipping hubs need dedicated designation, if they need a dedicated designated officers who are connected with the local port authorities, hospitals, insurers, and the maritime lawyers. Okay, next, coming to the multilateral collaboration, when India has should allied with the major seafarers supplying, which is nations like the Philippines and the Indonesia, through the IMO and ILO to push for the standard enforcement on which repatriation, detention, and the deployment in conflict zones. Okay, next, opposition to the attacks on commerce, that is, non-combat civilian crews. Non-combat civilian crews should not become the targets due to the disrupted to the disputed cargo or the hostile owners. Okay, if we see this data in a complete glance, Indian seafarers who from June 2025 we take approximately 3.2 lakh, nearly triple of 2014, has been working as the seafarers in from India. Okay, next, coming to the global ranking according to the 2026 report, if we take, India is placed second globally, that is more than 12 percentage of the global supply has been going from India. Okay, next, coming to the abandonments in 2025, that is according to the ITF data, that is 1,125 approximately Indian seafarers have been highest, which is globally. Okay, next, High risk zones. High risk zones are basically the Strait of Hormuz due to the West Asian conflicts, the Black Sea, the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aden, and the West Africa are the major conflict regions and are high risk zones. Okay. Now, DGC shipping action. DG shipping action, which is took up in May 14, 2025, is 366 vessels have been barred due to abandonment risk. Okay. Yes. Now, when we see the regulatory action and the right, which is the right to know what is happening and all, if we see the regulatory action, that is information transparency. That is, the seafarers deserve a clear detail on the real vessel ownership and also the transit routes where the ship is traveling to, and the sanction statuses, the valid insurance, and whether the owners have abandoned crews in the past. This the right to information what a seafarer can have before sailing. Yes. Next is the right to refuse risk. When a crew directed to the designated high risk zones must have the legal right to refuse entry and return home without financial or professional penalties. When if a company forces, obviously in Strait of Hormuz, the Red Sea or Black Sea or the Gulf of Aden, all these high risk zones, the government is not allowing the Indian seafarers to travel in that way. If any of the crew has directed to designated the high risk zones, must have they have the legal right to refuse the entry and return back home without any penalties. Okay. Next, regulatory interventions, like on May 14th, the Directorate General of Shipping, which has barred the license agencies from placing Indian seafarers on 366 vessels, which is linked to abandonment until the specific compliance standards were met. So the flag above the vessel may be of foreign. India's responsibility to its nationals is not. Okay, this is what we can take up from the regulatory action. Coming to the human cost at sea, the lives cost. Out of 14 Indians were killed in the West Asian conflicts, which have been related to the attacks since February 28th. Okay, at least 8 were the seafarers on the commercial ships. Out of 14, 8 were the seafarers from the commercial ships. Next, abandonment and uncertainty. Approximately 1,125 Indian seafarers were being abandoned since 2025, which is more than from any other country. Okay. Coming to the families in the dark, obviously when a person is traveling in a ship and they do not have any signals and they cannot contact with the families and all, it is very much what you call very much tough jobs to be considered. So the families do not know which entity, like the which government is responsible for a seafarer, which ship owner is responsible or an insurer is responsible when a seafarer is in danger, that a family doesn't know. Okay. Coming to the emotional and the financial toll, basically the prolonged detentions or the unpaid wages, the lack of medical care, and the uncertain repatriation causes, which causes the immense psychological and financial hardship. When we take upon the seafarer's job, approximately for 6 months they travel in ship. This Indian seafarers, approximately 6 to 8 months they travel in ship, and almost for 3 to 4 months they stay at home without any financial support. This is what the seafarers back dark thing is. Okay, for 6 to 8 months they get the ample of salary, but the rest 3 to 4 months when they are at home, they do not have any financial support from the company. Okay, that is one of the major drawback, that is very financial toll. Okay. Next, non-combat civilians, like these seafarers are the civilian workers. They should never be targeted due to the disputed cargo, sanctions, or the hostile owners. So every statistics is a human story. Protecting the seafarers is protecting India's dignity and the global standing. Okay. So yes, now why India's foreign policy must look seaward, the imperative, what is the imperative of it is to protect a vital workforce. Protect a vital workforce, like the seafarers are the backbone of the global trade, which is happening in between India and any other foreign countries. So their safety is a national priority. Okay, not between in India and other countries. It is about the global trade basically between the countries. It's a major role which is the seafarers are the backbone for this global trade. And also the economic imperative, which remittances from the seafarers are the major sources for foreign exchange for India. And also global reputation, when a proactive maritime stance enhances India's image as a responsible maritime nation. Okay, next, when you see the strategic influence of this, if we see the active engagement in maritime forms builds the influence and the leadership in the Indo-Pacific. Okay, next, the rule of law at sea. While campaigning the seafarers' rights support a rule-based fair and secure maritime order. Okay, next, the national responsibility. When we take upon the concept of national responsibility, the state has an enduring duty to uh, safeguard its citizens whenever they may be, wherever they may be, and however they may be. It is the right of the state to protect its citizens. Okay, from land to sea, India's duty of care must travel with its people. Okay, wherever they are. Next, coming to the summary for it and a way forward, if we look on, shift from reactive to proactive, like move from the treating seafarers as emergency consular cases to proactively establishing the continuous tracking, risk monitoring, and dedicated maritime relations. Okay, next, strengthen the diplomatic protocols. Also, develop the specialized consular maritime protocols which are tailored to the realities of multi-judicial maritime employment. Okay, next, coming to the global norm settings, if we see, leveraging the multilateral bodies like this IMO or the ILO, and build the conditions with our labor supplying nations to prevent the flag state evasion and ensure the accountability. Okay, now enforce the worker rights. How? By ensuring the transparency, right to refuse high risk zones, fair recruitment, and valid insurance, and zero tolerance for the abandonment. Okay, next is the long term maritime vision. In this way forward also we can take by integrating the seafarer welfare into India's Act East and Indo Pacific strategy, which is aligning the commerce, security, and human interests. Okay, now what are the challenges ahead we can face from we are facing from it is the jurisdictional complexity, like overlapping laws, flags of convenience, and weak enforcement make the accountability difficult. And also the flag state evasions, like the flags of convenience allows this delinquent owners to evade responsibility. Okay, next, limited consular reach. That is, when Indian missions often lack the manpower, the expertise, and the resources to handle the maritime specific cases. Okay, next, geopolitical volatility, like expanding this conflict zones and the maritime insecurity increases the risk for seafarers. Next is the information asymmetry, like the seafarers often lack the access to the accurate, timely, and the critical information before the deployment. Okay, yes, these are the challenges ahead. So, when we look into the mains analysis angles, in that we can see the first question, if we look on to, I hope it is visible now. Yes. Examine the challenges faced by the Indian seafarers in the context of evolving the geopolitical conflicts and the multi-judicial maritime operations. This is one of the perspective from this article which we can take for mains. And next, discuss the need for reforms in India, consular and the diplomatic protocols to protect the seafarers globally. Okay. Next, the third perspective is how can Indian leverage multilateral platforms like IMO and ILO to safeguard the rights of seafarers? Okay, and the next perspective is critically analyze the right to know and right to refuse for seafarers in high risk maritime zones. And also, see, evaluate the significance of seafarers for Indian economy and its implications for foreign policy. And also, what steps can India take to set the global norms on seafarer protection and accountability? These are the few questions from which we can take out in the mains perspective from this article. Do write this answers and submit us in the Telegram channel so that we can see and give you the feedback for you all personally. Okay. Now, Let us move on to the next article. The next article for today is a growth story that needs women at work. So, this article was given by the economist Santosh Mehrotra and Judge Kesari Padya regarding the India's developmental ambitions. India's developmental ambitions. Okay, so India aims to become a Vikshit Bharat, a well-developed nation, that is Vikshit Bharat, for around 2047. This is the main aim of India. However, the macro data highlights the few significant structural concerns, like majorly the youth unemployment. The youth unemployment today is roughly double than that of 2012. So, approximately, while the external shocks like the West Asia conflicts or the domestic policy included induced shocks like the GST design, the decentralization, demonetization. The COVID-19 pandemic management has caused a reversal in structural changes between 2016 to 2021. So, evidenced by a rise in farm employment and failing the manufacturing share in the GDP. This is what the article is talking about. So, when the real GDP growth has slowed down, with independent estimates placing it closer to 4.5 percentage rather than the the estimates placing it closer to 4.5 percentage rather than the official figures to be 6.2 percentage. Rather than 6.2 percentage, the real GDP has given 4.5 percentage by the estimates. Okay, so to sustain this 8 to 9 percentage of the annual growth and reach the developed state status, India cannot afford to leave half of its population behind. Okay, now this article talks about a few key themes. What is this? In that first thing is women as a engine of economic growth. Why is female labor participation crucial for Indian macroeconomic health? Let us see first. First, in the perspective, if you see of direct GDP impact, a 10 percentage point increase, a 10 percentage of point increase in the India's female work participation rate could add nearly 2 percentage to the percentage points to the annual GDP growth of India. Okay, and also when you look into the perspective of human capital formation, when the higher female employment, which are directly translated into increased household incomes like savings and better spendings on nutrition, education and healthcare for children. Okay, and also referencing the Nobel laureate the Claudia Golden's research, the gender diverse workplaces has fostered the higher efficiency, creativity, and global competitiveness. And we have seen all this. What is the current reality in India? Current reality in India is India's female workforce participation rate remains below 30 percentage. It remains below the female workforce participation rate has been remains 30 percentage, which is comparably very low participation regions like the Saudi Arabia, the Yemen, and exceptionally low relative to peer nations and similar income levels. Okay, and coming to the key second theme when of this article which we can take up is the structural decline and the distress driven feminization. To understand this where we are, let us look at the timeline of the female labor in India. Okay, when you look into, just a second, yes, when you look into 1980s to 1990s, 1980s to 1990s, there is a high uh, high female workforce participation, which is mostly in the agriculture labor. Okay, when coming to 2004 to 2017 to 18 approximately, if we see, the workforce participation of women has declined rapidly due to the rural mechanization and the U-shaped Gaudian curve. Okay, next, Coming to the post 2020, after that COVID and all, there is a spurt in female workforce participation, which is driven by the economic distress. Okay, so when we look into the post 2020 paradox, okay, while the official statistic shows an increase in the female workforce participation post 2020, which is economists basically label this as a distress driven feminization of agriculture. Okay, and obviously, as we know, the COVID-19 has caused massive reverse migration from cities to the rural areas. So, the male job loss forced the women into the low productivity, informal, and the unpaid family labor to supplement the household income. And also, the growth concentrated heavily in the capital intensive sectors like finance, IT, heavy industries, etc. So, that which generate fewer jobs, while the labor intensive sectors like the textiles, garments, and food processing saw the absolute employment drop between 2013 and 2019. Okay, yes, this is the article what it is talking about. Let us see this article in a complete detailed way. Yes, let us see. A growth story that needs women at work. The author of this article is Santosh Mehrotra, that is the former professor of economics, the JNU, and the Judge T. Kesari Padhya, who is the professor of economics, University of Hyderabad. Okay, the growth story that needs women at work. Let us see the context of the topic. The basic context of this topic is India's growth remains incomplete and below the potential as long as half the population is excluded from the productive employment. So, the women's meaningful participation in the workforce is essential for achieving Vikshit Bharat by 2047. And how can we link this article to our syllabuses for GS paper 2 in the governance topic and the issues relating to the developmental and management of social sectors and all? We can link this article, and also to the public GS paper 3, that is the inclusive growth and human resource development, the employment generation and skill development and labor reforms. Also we can link this article to. Okay, now let us look into the core concept and key arguments of this article. Economic context and the growth challenges, like the youth unemployment. The current youth unemployment is double the rate which is recorded in 2012. And coming to the structural weaknesses, the domestic policy, which is included the shocks like the demonetization, the GST design, the NBFC crisis, and COVID-19 management, has predated the external global shocks. Example, the West Asian War. Okay, declining indicators like rise in the farm employment, falling to the manufacturer share of GVA and the employment, and slowing the non-farm job growth that have deepened the aggregate demand and investment to GDP ratios. Okay, now coming to the actual GDP growth, which is estimated closer to the 4.5 percentage per annum, versus the official figures are around 6.2 percentage per annum. Okay, now coming to the women's employment as an engine of growth, which we can, as we spoke previously about the key factor in this article, when we see the women's employment as a key engine of growth, this is a key factor from the article which we can take up. What is the impact of having a higher workforce participation of women is a 10 percentage of the 10 percentage point of increase in the female workforce participation rate could add nearly 2 percentage points to the India's GDP growth. And what are the benefits of it? It expands the productive capacity and the labor supply, and also boosts the household incomes, consumption, and the savings. It improves the long term human capital, which is by better nutrition, education, healthcare for children, and also enhances the productivity, creativity, and the competitive edge, which is given by the Nobel laureate Claudia Golden. Okay, now what is the current status about this female workforce participation rate is the female workforce participation in India remains below 30%, which is comparable to Saudi Arabia and Yemen and the West Asian levels. Okay, next, coming to the trends and issues in female workforce participation, if we see the historical decline, like from 1983 to 2018, as we discussed, if we see, the workforce participation rate of women has fell due to the modern mechanization in the agriculture and the structural shift away from the farm work, alongside increased school attendance among the young women, that is U-shaped curve trajectory. Okay, now coming to post 2020 surge, after this what you call the COVID-19 and all, it has been called as a distress drive by the economists. Like, the post 2020 has increased in the female workforce participation rate, which reflects the economic distress and the distress driven feminization of agriculture or the unpaid family labor rather than high quality job creation. Okay, next, capital intensive growth. The growth has been favored sectors like IT, finance, and the organized manufacturing, so which absorbs a few workers, while labor intense sectors like textiles, food processing, small size manufacturing, which saw the job losses between 2013 to 2019. Okay, coming to the regional disparities in the north south divide, if we see, Tamil Nadu leads in the south. However, the houses over 40% of Indian women factory workers, despite the having only 5% to 6% of the national population. Okay, which is driven by the textile, footwear, electronic assemblies, or higher literacy, and the work mobility and safe transport or hostel facilities, which led the women in Tamil Nadu to work rather than having 5 to 6% of Indian population. Okay, coming to the northern states lag, the Hindi belt states lagged significantly due to high manufacturing or the stunting rates and lack of public investment in health, education, and safe mobility. So, example, if we take the Bihar's female workforce participation rate is only approximately 15 percentage. Okay, but in Tamil Nadu, if we see, it is 40 percentage. Okay. Yes. At a glance, if we see the youth unemployment, which has been doubled since 2012. Okay. So the annual GDP growth, which is approximately 4.5 percentage of per annum. Okay. And also the female workforce participation in India is approximately less than 30 percentage. And also, by adding 10 percentage points of the female workforce participation to the GDP, it adds around 2 percentage of the PP in the GDP of India. Okay. Now, young women, if we consider the age of 15 to 29, the what you called the NETM has rose from less than 70 million per pre 2004 to more than 100 million in by 2018. Okay, yes, coming to the crisis of education in young women, if we see, despite of under a universalized secondary education and the gender parity in the school enrollment in states like Uttar Pradesh and the Bihar, education of young women face high and rising unemployment. So the count of young women who are from 15 to 29 years of age, neither in education employment nor looking for the work roles are under 70 million per pre 2004 to over 100 million by 2018. Okay, so this reflects a severe waste of human capital and a barrier to the inclusive growth. So India cannot achieve its developmental status vision, that is Vikshit Bharat of 2047, without the meaningful integration of women into the workforce. Okay, now coming to the sectoral patterns and the jobless growth, if we see, the capital intensive growth, basically the growth concentrated in the IT, finance, and the organized manufacturing, the absorbed few workers. Okay, next, labor intensive sectors lag. Basically, the labor intensive sectors like the textiles, the food processing, the small scale manufacturing witnesses the job losses between 2013 to 2019. And coming to the distress in the rural areas, if we see, the weak non-farm job creations has pushed more women into agriculture and unpaid family labor. Okay. Now, what is this unpaid family labor is? Unpaid family labor is nothing but a large large share of women's work which remains invisible and unpaid, which is depressing the productivity and earnings for the family. So, India's growth story remains incomplete, unequally distributed, and below the potential as long as the half of the population is excluded from productive employment. Okay, now, and why this article basically talks about women workforce participation, which it is telling the women participation in the workforce is very much mandatory, means when you see the multiplier effect of it, it expands the productive capacity. If a woman works in a house, she brings up the more people into labor force, increasing the output and GDP, obviously. And also it boosts the household income, like it leads to higher consumption, savings, and the financial resiliences. Okay, and also strengthens the human capital by improving the nutrition. If a woman is working at home, it obviously she has that independent income, and she can look onto the nutrition of her child and all. So it improves the nutrition, education, and the healthcare outcomes for the next generations. Okay, and also it enhances the productivity and creativity, like the diverse workforce has improves the innovations, creativity, and the competitive edge, and also accelerates the inclusive growth by how it reduces the inequality and promotes the balanced and sustainable development in the state. And also the demographic dividend by harnessing the women's potential, which converts the demographic dividend into the economic dividend. So including women in the workforce is not merely a welfare measure but also a strategy for enhancing national productivity. Okay, now coming up to the strategic recommendations which we can see, like a way forward for this article. If we talk the policy support for the labor intensive manufacturing, like boost the sectors like garments, footwear, and the food processing through targeted policy support and intensive PLI, that is public linked incentive schemes, and aimed at the job creations, which are aimed at job creations. Next, targeted regional investments, like the northern states must heavily invest in public health, the education, transport, infrastructure, and safe housing or hostels for working women to mirror the southern successes. Okay, next, transition from distress work to quality jobs, like shift focus from the rural substance or unpaid agricultural labor towards the formal remunerative non-farm employments for educated women, young women. Okay, next, coming to the data monitor and the accountability, if we see, strengthen the gender disaggregated data systems, track the outcomes, and ensure the accountability of schemes and programs for women employment is very much recommended. Okay, these are the way forwards or the recommendations which we can give it for this article. Now, when you coming to the road ahead, if we see, create quality jobs. What happens if we do all this, if we do all these changes and everything, what does it do? It creates job quality jobs. That means it focuses on the job rich growth model that prioritizes the employment generation over capital intensity. And also it invests in people, obviously, like this quality public spending on education, health, nutrition, skills, and safe mobility for women, and also ensures the safe and safety and dignity, like by safe transport for women, secure workplaces, and the gender sensitive infrastructures are critical enablers for a woman to work. Okay, next, enables the financial and social empowerment, like it access to the credit, digital tools, and the rights and social security, enhances the woman agency, and also build an inclusive growth model, that an economy that enables the woman to work in an economy that can achieve Vikshit Bharat by 2047. These are the main road aheads. If we take up all these measures and if we develop the infrastructures and the women workforce participation rate increases, these are the roadmaps which can be created ahead. Okay, yes, these are the two articles which have been discussed for today. And yes, these are the two articles for today. I hope everyone liked this video. If you want a detailed PDF of it, do visit our website and download it from there. And do like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more editorial analysis. And also do follow our Instagram ID and Telegram ID as well for your UPSC preparations. Okay, yes, I'll see you all tomorrow with another editorial analysis. Thank you.